Thank you. Welcome, everybody. This is the 8th session of the 11th Central Asia Trade Forum. It's the second virtual one, unfortunately, due to COVID. We hope next year it will be in person. This session is on e-commerce and last mile delivery. We have two panels in this session. The first one that we'll begin with is on policy and technology solutions to facilitate low-value e-commerce shipments in Central Asia. I would like to thank our panelists that are in this session. Thank you for your time and participation. We have today in our session Aykanush Saparalieva, General Manager of Global Kyrgyzstan. Welcome and nice to see you again.
Thank you.
Stephen Pope, Vice President of DHL. Hi, Stephen. It's nice to see you again. Mirza Sokurov, Strategy and Operations Director at PwC. PricewaterhouseCoopers, nice to meet you. And my colleague, Kati Sumonen, Founder and CEO of NextTrade. I will just do a brief introduction, just a couple of things I would like to say, and then I'll pass it over to my colleague, Kati. She's our expert in these areas. Just some technical things beforehand as we're beginning. There's a globus on the bottom. You can select your language, Russian or English, for the translation. For comments, please use the chat box and the Q&A box. And presenters, please mute your microphones when you're not speaking. Thank you on that. So again, I would like to thank our colleagues from CTJ for the great organization, the virtual one last year and this year. I know it's difficult, for the opportunity to hold these sessions on these very important topics. And again, thank you to the panelists for your time. It's really appreciated. E-commerce is the economy of the future, as we all know. The bloodstream and infrastructure of e-commerce are the supply chains and the necessary warehousing, logistics, etc., which we're going to be talking about in these sessions. As the World Bank representative said in yesterday's session, shipment and transport costs in Central Asia compared to other comparable regions such as Central, Southern, and Eastern Europe are 4 times or 5 times higher. This automatically is a huge disadvantage for our companies here in Central Asia. And then in addition to that, they need to improve processes through digital transformation, modernize their warehousing, engage more sellers to utilize these e-trade platforms in their countries, the region, and globally. USAID through FGI, our project, is initiating some improvements in these areas by working with some leading anchor firms on digital transformation, sharing overall global best practices with multinational companies such as MasterCard, UPS, PayPal, DHL, VTEX, hopefully others, for Central Asia SMEs. We are also working on localizing e-commerce introductory courses to reach more SMEs with the Latin America E-Commerce Institute, as well as in cooperation with ITC, introducing pilot sellers on the global platform eBay through the Central Asia hub there. Last but not least, which is the topic in policy in this panel session, through our business enabling environment component, we're trying to initiate e-commerce policy changes in the region, working with key local stakeholders such as Atamiken in Kazakhstan, E-Commerce Association in Kyrgyzstan, the E-Commerce Council with the Tajikistan Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Tajikistan, and the International Women's Union of Sharkayoli in Uzbekistan. So we're trying to initiate as much as possible through ours and coordinate with other donors. So enough from me. I would like to ask Kati to get us started. Maybe we can each go through our short introductory presentations and then have a nice open discussion. So thank you, Kati, please.
Thanks very much, Philip. You hear me okay?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining this panel. Thanks, Philip, for the introduction. Thanks also to FGI and CTJ for their support and organization of this program. And of course, to US Agency for International Development for your support of our work. Well, as Philip said, the line between traditional trade and e-commerce is every day less. More and more companies are conducting their business digitally, getting on global online marketplaces, setting up their own online stores, and reaching customers in a wider scale than ever has been possible around the world. And this is certainly the case also in Central Asia. And we're thrilled to be able to support some of this work that is on the way to promote e-commerce. At the same time, as we've seen e-commerce presenting new challenges for the region, both for the companies to manage their logistics, oftentimes shipping different smaller volumes to customers around the world, kind of manage the outbound shipments, and for customs and border agencies to manage the inbound volumes of e-commerce. Consumers are ordering more products online, and there's much more volume and variety of goods to handle. So these two panels that we'll have in the next couple of hours will touch on these issues, how businesses can better orchestrate their e-commerce logistics. And that's the next panel after this panel. And this panel will very much focus on the policy and technology solutions, particularly for government audiences in the region to enable e-commerce. And my role is to be a bit of a moderator and a presenter as well. So I thought to just present a couple of slides to kind of kick us off and then turn it over to Stephen. And please, I understand that you are able to ask questions through the chat and so on. So please just post questions and I'll seek to pick up your questions as we go. So just a couple of slides here to get us going. So as we've seen during COVID, there's been a sea change around the world in terms of delivery, demand for delivery from individuals. This is Google search trends from various countries in Western Europe, as well as the United States, on how delivery demand on Google searches spiked in March of 2020 and has since been quite elevated. The same trends occurred in Central Asia. So this is Uzbekistan, and you see the same spike in demand for delivery and e-commerce, and the same in other countries of the region. So there's a lot of demand for e-commerce, and we have been doing quite a lot of survey work around the world on how firms are using e-commerce. And these are some of the patterns we see everywhere, including in Central Asia. We see that particularly larger companies are already using global marketplaces. They're onboarding e-commerce platforms, and micro firms are not far behind. When we look at different platforms, of course, the small micro firms, including in Central Asia, are using still social media channels, and larger companies are starting to use platforms like Amazon and others to sell online. But everybody's getting more and more into the e-commerce ecosystem. Now, when we look at these different segments of firms, including in Central Asia, we typically see 5 types. We see those that are not that digitized yet, and then we see at the other end of the spectrum, firms that are very digitized and are selling on marketplaces, are really taking advantage of e-commerce. And of course, our aspiration here is to bring everybody more and more toward these firms that are selling online, are taking advantage of the global marketplace, and so on, through improving the enabling environment for e-commerce. And that is exactly the topic of this session. How do we improve the enabling environment for e-commerce for these firms to be able to take advantage of the import and export opportunities that e-commerce offers? And then the next panel will discuss more about the SME's own digital transformation and technology solutions that are out there that companies can take advantage of as they move to the e-commerce economy. Now, if we think of Central Asia in these 2 axes, we have a couple of measures to think about this. And we find that the region is doing okay, but still below the trend of below where the economies of at the same level of development are. So our quest here is to get this region from here to the OECD level. That's the aspiration of some of the work that we're doing here with Philip as well. And very quickly to look at some trends that I just picked up, Central Asia has improved on paperless trade and trade facilitation indices that are critical to improve on if you want to facilitate e-commerce delivery. And these numbers have been improving in the UN paperless trade survey every year. Kazakhstan is doing better than the global average, Kyrgyzstan as well. Of course, there's still work to do, but things are improving in the region. There is, however, still work to do in various areas of e-commerce logistics, ability to track and trace consignments, of course, improve paperless trade as well, and improve the quality of trade logistics infrastructure. So there are some areas where this panel hopefully will shed light and insight on how we can improve Central Asia's place on this in disease. And of course, for customs, and this is probably where the panel will also deepen quite a lot, is we have these mountains of parcels and packages coming to customs around the world. And then the question is, how do we manage this? How do we efficiently and securely facilitate the customs clearance? And a couple of examples that I think are very exciting technology-wise are, for instance, blockchain that enables customs agencies as well as agencies within single windows to interoperate more seamlessly, and ultimately can enable customs, including in Central Asia, to interoperate with one another. And this is a case from Latin America, where the Inter-American Development Bank has created a platform to enable Latin American customs agencies in different countries, A, B, C, and D. These are like Colombia, Peru, Mexico, and so on, to interoperate and share authorized economic operator certifications using blockchain. Very nice innovation, would be the future for Central Asia as well. Much more visibility for all players. Another very nice innovation that seems to be taking off around the world in clearing goods as they come through customs is the use of artificial intelligence and the amount of data that customs have on different packages and parcels, including as well as containers, and to more rapidly scan containers or understand which containers or packages present unique risks that should be taken aside and which can clear faster. The Japanese customs has estimated that instead of 10 seconds that it takes for a customs official to look at a package and determine whether that's illicit or illicit trade, artificial intelligence enables the customs official to do this within fractions of a second. So there's great efficiency gains coming from these technologies as well. However, there's still policy work to be done, obviously, in the region. So I'll leave it at that. And really, in this panel, we'll want to turn, of course, to talking about these technology solutions that enable customs clearance of low-value items and kind of uniquely the hallmark of e-commerce. But we will also want to talk about the policy side of things and how governments around the world are reducing the time to clear customs, how they are creating more efficient procedures or simplifying the clearance of goods as they come through customs. And with that, I will turn to our first speaker, Stephen Pope, who is the Vice President at DHL. Steve has tremendous experience in thinking about trade facilitation issues. He is one of the chairs of the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation that's also supported by USAID and sits on various committees of this nature around the world to help governments and international organizations promote more efficient trade. So Steve, what are some of the things that you're seeing out there in terms of both good practices that are emerging now with COVID as everybody's digitizing their border processes more, and then there are some kind of bad practices as well that are proliferating out there, perhaps taxis and more complicated procedures, particularly for small businesses to enter their goods into countries. So what are you seeing out there, and what kinds of recommendations would you have for this particular region as you scan the world and think about the unique opportunities in Central Asia?
Yeah, thanks, Kati, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much for the kind invitation. What we're seeing is the extreme at both ends in terms of facilitation and the impact of the border across the piece. And of course, since the COVID pandemic, we've seen digitalization accelerate considerably, which is a positive thing. And a key example is this event here. Normally we would be flying out to a venue and in a conference like this. Now having these sessions online is everyday occurrence for us. The advantage of an event like this is it reaches more people very, very quickly, and more people are able to join. It's more democratic. And ironically, or coincidentally, so is e-commerce. It's exactly the same. It's a paradigm shift in trade, and this is something that we need to adapt to. And for the policy officials out there, I'm going to explain to you why beforehand, where you were concerned about what came into your borders and wanted to help drive exports, one was not necessarily concerned with the regulatory environment at the other end of the supply chain, i.e. the market that you're trying to target. And actually in the world of e-commerce, that has become even more important. In fact, I would say it's essential because of the nature of the individuals that are involved in e-commerce. Most commerce that we knew before was driven by bulk container truck or air freight. It was dealt at a macro level. So you had a bulk, and very often the businesses, the enterprises behind the production and delivery and selling of the products were large organizations which were able to mitigate some of the non-tariff barriers that they were seeing in their markets. But with the democratization of e-commerce, the players are much broader in terms of their economic strength and ability to adapt to legislative change. So beforehand, what you had was, if you were a market seller, say in a Central Asian city, your customers were people who walked past your market stall or walked past your shop. They may have been in the country, but basically they were people that saw what was in your shop window. That was your advertisement to the world. That was your offering. Well, today, if you have the right product at the right price, putting it on the internet suddenly expands your horizons. Instantly, almost, you have access to the global market. You can sell anywhere. And this is where, certainly I would say to the policy advisors here, this is something that we need to take advantage of. The SMEs are the drivers of the global economy anyway, and never more so than in least developed economies. And at the end of the day, the potential for these SMEs to grow is absolutely enormous. There are so many success stories out there of companies that started in a garage, started selling things on the internet, and now these are billion-dollar companies. I'm not saying overnight you're going to have a billion-dollar company, but what I am saying is the potential is there. So, and of course, e-commerce is digital. Therefore, the border processes need to be digital. But what I would say in terms of regulation is, just because you digitalize something doesn't mean that you will necessarily expedite that export or that import. You need to have the regulation to back it up. And I'll give you an example. We worked on a program with one country where we ended up actually doubling the delays, not halving them. The reason being the legislation wasn't in place to deal with the digital traffic. And so we ended up with two processes, not one, a digital process and a parallel to that, a paper-based process. So you need to look at things like, at the basic level, first of all, digital signature, recognizing the documents that you're requiring, and understanding there is a wealth of data out there. E-commerce, Cathy showed that picture of all those shipments sitting in that warehouse. It looks like a nightmare, but every single shipment has data behind it. Even postal shipments have some data. There is electronic data there. You need to be able to use that data for your own purposes. And this is where risk management and risk profiling come in. And so when you're faced with and I know it's been called a tsunami, but I think that's quite negative, to be honest, because certainly for the economies, e-commerce has helped mitigate the impact of the pandemic. We would be in a far worse place economically around the world if we hadn't have had digitalization and e-commerce. So And this is why the World Bank is able to say that we will bounce back much quicker. But there is a caveat to that. They're saying DCs and LDCs won't bounce back as quickly. In fact, we may end up with the wealth gap growing, and that's something we need to avoid. So my answer would be, for certainly, I'll start with inbound. Inbound into your countries, your customs need to be able to implement risk management, risk profiling. It's called pre-arrival processing, taking the data in advance of the goods arriving and be able to run that data through your risk engine and deciding which shipments coming inbound, which products coming inbound represent a threat, whether it's smuggling, whether it's a fiscal risk, or whether you just need to check that it complies with certain license requirements in your country. And then the vast majority of legitimate shipments you just let go through. You know, a customs officer previously, a perfect example, would clear a container and it would have 10,000 items in it. Well, with e-commerce, you don't have one container, one declaration, and 10,000 items. You have 10,000 declarations. And of course, you can't manage them all. So you need to introduce that. And of course, you have the World Customs Organization's revised Kyoto Convention, you have the immediate release guidelines, and the WCO produces super training and advice material online, and such capacity building as we're seeing here through education and practical solutions on the ground enables you to implement these sort of reforms that you need. And of course, the trade facilitation agreement from the WTO. There was never a more important time to introduce the trade facilitation agreement or implement the trade facilitation agreement now. And as fortunately as a number of you know, yes, we're making progress on the TFA, but we're still nowhere near the level of implementation that we need. Now, what we've seen, for example, during the pandemic, particularly around personal protection equipment, i.e. masks and things, and hand sanitizers, and then vaccines, is that those countries that digitalized immediately, and I mean just moving from paper to email, were able to get the goods through the border and where it's needed as quickly as possible. And the other advantage that you have in treating all of them, you may ask yourself, well, e-commerce isn't personal protection equipment for to counter the pandemic. But if you don't clear those shipments coming into the border, what you do is you clog the border. And we saw this in the first 3 to 6 months of the pandemic. It was like a traffic jam on a motorway or an autobahn. Yeah, there was, all the cars were stuck in the traffic jam, and all the personal protection equipment was coming from behind, but of course had to stop because it couldn't get through. So this is another reason why you need to expedite everything. So that's your inbound process, adopting and adapting to the digital world, implementing risk-based approaches, and more importantly, making sure that you engage with all the agencies that need to be there. And single window is a key example, but I'm not saying that single window overnight will be your solution. What I'm saying first is the agencies need to speak to each other to make sure that if customs have cleared something, the shipment doesn't then sit there for a week waiting for another agency to look at it. You need to make sure that you all know on the same day, this import is there, you want to look at it, make sure the other agencies, if they want to look at it, they look at it there and then. So that's your border process. Now, I mentioned why the fact that it's ever more important now that countries that want to drive e-commerce with SMEs are aware of what's going on in the target markets. And sadly, we are seeing a growth of non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers, basically that's red tape. That is, these are processes that slow down the actual clearance of the goods. It's requiring more data, more paper, more checks. That, you know, these are what's known as non-tariff barriers. So they're not taxes, but what they do is they slow down, and in some respects actually prevent countries from exporting to target markets. And you need to be there aware of that. And the place to do that is the World Trade Organization, is the WTO. And you need to watch this. And a key area on that where we're seeing non-tariff barriers is around what we call consumption taxes, which is like VAT, or countries call them general sales taxes. Now, these are taxes which are collected normally when you buy a product in a shop. So if you go in a shop and you buy, I don't know, you buy a radio, you'll pay VAT or GST, general sales tax, on it. And it will be collected by the shop. And then at the end of the month, or after 3 months, they will submit a return, a tax declaration, and pay the VAT. Well, what we're seeing in some areas is these taxes being transferred to the border to collect on VAT. And we're talking about what we call so-called low value shipments. So these are goods which don't attract a customs duty, but they do attract a VAT. But instead of them being collected on a sort of what do you call it? I've lost the word now. But on a sort of on a sort of regular basis via a transaction. I'll think of the word in a minute. They're being collected on a transactional basis, so at a periodic basis. So instead of collecting all the tax later on a periodic basis, i.e. a month or 3 months after the goods have come in, and paying a bulk amount for, say, 5,000 shipments to the tax authority, they're being collected under the old system, which is the customs way of doing things, which is what we call transactional, each individual shipment, which of course creates costs and delays. And what we're seeing from SMEs who have great products, have a market, in certain developed economies, they're finding it too expensive to export to those countries. And it's actually preventing them from accessing those markets. And that's not fair. And that's not right. And that's something that you need to be aware of. And so, the world has changed. Your exports are someone else's imports, someone else's exports are your imports. And e-commerce has joined that. All the data is exactly the same. The way that's processing it at each end is different, but the data is exactly the same. And you need to make sure that if you drive an export strategy to support your SMEs, that they can actually reach the target markets that you want to get to. And if you don't, you need to look at what those countries are doing in terms of facilitating that trade. And this is something that we're heavily involved in through the trade facilitation programs that we're involved in with USAID, with CUTI through the E-Trade Alliance and other organizations. It's looking at this. So I've gone on a bit, Kati. So it just as a quick summary, in terms of your imports and dealing with your customs, digitalize, introduce risk processes. Facilitation is there to help you to do that, but focus very much on only looking at what you need, collecting the data that you require, and making sure you clear the rest. On your exports, make sure that your export processes are really simple, but make sure that you're aware of the non-tariff barriers that your SMEs will be impacted by in the markets that what you want to do. And finally, in terms of the SMEs, ignorance is not an excuse for breaking the law. So what we're doing is we're working very much with our partners in USAID through the Global Alliance, through the E-Trade Alliance, on training SMEs as well, to make sure that the SMEs understand what the legal requirements are for targeting the markets that they're targeting as well. So from a policy perspective, please look at that. But what is also working in the background, of course, is making sure that the SMEs are aware of what their legal requirements, both in your countries, but also in the countries that they're trying to reach. If we get all that right, we'll see the growth. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. That's fantastic, with a lot of advice packed into 10 minutes or so. Very, very actionable and helpful. And we'll probably come back to you to hear about some global best practices that you've seen, some examples of good countries that have implemented some of these reforms. So let's turn now to the local context. We have here Aikanush Sparalieva, who is General Manager for Glovo in Kyrgyzstan. And Aikanush has been a driver of e-commerce and e-commerce ecosystem in Central Asia for many years as well. She was or is probably still the head of the Kyrgyzstan E-Commerce Association and so forth, has been very involved in these discussions. So given your deep expertise in this area, what are you seeing in e-commerce in the region currently, and what are the challenges you would highlight, and the solutions, perhaps echoing, or perhaps you have other solutions that Stephen mentioned as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kati. I really appreciate your kind introduction, and I appreciate the invitation at this panel. Since today I represent the local on-demand delivery platform, I will try to give some visibility to what is happening there in terms of local last mile delivery. First of all, since, I mean, we are talking a lot about e-commerce, right? About its opportunities cross-border, but we also have another trend. This e-commerce is getting very local, and today's technologies makes available, right? To get any product rightly immediate at your doorstep in half an hour. So this is another trend, and I think today what we observe is lots of international big players like Glovo, Volt, Yandex are entering the market, starting investing into delivery. And they're entering the market with their right technologies, operations, marketing approaches to boost the delivery market. And this overall, like, since we represent this food delivery, I think food is one of the promising, fast-growing markets, right? Since food is the first product to order probably all over the world. And to give you some context, how the market overall is globally growing and maturing, today this the food delivery market is split into two. The delivery from the restaurants itself, and then platform to consumer deliveries. So Glovo and such kind of platforms, they represent this platform to consumer delivery industry. And this industry today reached $173 billion. And the overall market penetration is 20%. So every fifth person globally makes orders at least once in a month. So this is quite a penetrated market. And of course, this is not equally spread across the world, right? We have more mature markets and we have less mature markets. And of course, in here, probably China is the most grown and mature markets, having more than 80% of the market turnover and market penetration. So can you imagine the rest of the world, how much is behind from, of course, China? I mean, the density of the population makes it worth investing, right? Because the return on investment is much higher. However, what we do observe is such countries, even Kyrgyzstan, we are just 6 million, right? It is still growing. Means like there is also a lot of opportunities there. And what makes attractive such small markets for entering such big players first is mobile penetration. So the world is getting penetrated and more connected. So in Kyrgyzstan, for example, we have 80% of population have this the penetration of the mobiles itself, and the mobile communication network connection is also widespread. So it makes attractive such platforms. And also the young generation. In Kyrgyzstan, we have like 70% of the population are between 18 to 45. So probably this generation are quite more eager to make orders online, and they're quite open to any new technology. So this is also one of the promising areas. And also in this, even in these small markets, we have a lot of content, a lot of SMEs, restaurants, shops are readily available. So the main goal is actually to digitalize them, right? To have them in a platform to make and to grow their online orders. So this is one of the challenges and one of the vision that such platforms have in such growing markets like Central Asia. And we have like 4 big players in Kazakhstan. It is like Glovo, Volt, Yandex, Chocofood. In Kyrgyzstan, Glovo is the first e-commerce on-demand delivery platform, such big and international, who entered the market and started investing into the e-commerce delivery. So yeah, and this, I believe this last mile delivery is one of the most challenging, right, roles, because, you know, especially in this after pandemic world, the consumers' behaviors and habits have shifted, right? Now consumers don't want to wait like another week or even the next day delivery. They really want to have this anything available right immediately in their doorstep, maximum in 1 hour, right? So in order to make this happen, a lot of technologies, operations, efficiency, and marketing strategies and investments has to be involved in order to provide that level of operations. And of course, such big players, at this stage, they're not earning profits, right? It is more about investing and growing the markets, having the right size and level so that after optimization, you will start earning earnings. So that's first thing to, I think, very important to highlight. So it's more about investing. So what are the two challenges I think I can solve by such on-demand delivery platforms are experiencing, like in such kind of growing markets? First is market education. The first, both consumers, SMEs, the e-commerce penetration is not high, right? It is still tiny, still a lot of room to grow. And there is no consumer habit to make orders online. So we are really pushing and trying to change it by making the delivery first content available, second affordable the delivery for majority of the population so that they can start actually using delivery platforms. For SMEs also a lot of education requires to make them understand how these platforms are being operated. We also have required from them some readiness to go to the delivery market, right? Because yeah, we provide enough tools, enough technologies and operations to go online from the day one. However, in order to satisfy the delivery market, they also have to adapt their offers, right? These right offers, promos, products itself, pricing, the packaging, everything also has to fit the local market. So this is something we are trying to educate them. Also how to use our tools, how to update the statuses, right? Because I mean, in this last mile delivery, a lot of things can happen in the last time, right? Last minute. So we really need to handle that everything is up to date, and in order to work properly with the consumers' expectations, couriers' expectations, and SMEs' expectations. And second is a challenge, I would say, is to balance between demand and supply. And when I tell supply is providing enough couriers on time, right? Because we need to always make sure we have enough couriers to support the growth. And this is also like one of the challenges we experience here, especially at this stage when we are moving from the summer period to autumn period. In our region, like Central Asia, we have this quite tough winter conditions, and this climate is not like that stable like in other parts of the world. So we need to also adapt our vehicle mix and fleets according to the season. So now we have to switch from bicycles and to scooters more to cars, right? In order to provide, in order to still make our operations efficient and fast. And of course, when the weather is very cold, bicycles will not collaborate with us, right? Because since it's very cold outside. So we also need to always make sure we have enough couriers in order to support the growth. And to be honest, in terms of growth, we are above expectations. We grew really, really fast. And the challenge is just to make sure we have enough couriers who will interact with our platforms and also earn enough for themselves, but also deliver the value to SMEs and us and the consumers. And we at each stage, we also are improving and trying to adapt our technologies to the local market. We need to make sure that in each stage of the order, we did our best to decrease any downtimes. We are trying to optimize the times while the order is being assigned to couriers and sent to the notification to the partners. We are trying to optimize the prep times of the partners. This is also a huge, challenge, because the local SMEs, we are fighting them to push to cook orders faster. I mean, they get used to cook it like long, but in the delivery market, we really need to make sure that we are delivering up to 45 minutes, because we have a lot of researches which is saying like, if we are delaying the order above 45 minutes, then the probability of the second orders from that individual is decreasing, is declining drastically, because customers are becoming unsatisfied if they don't get their orders up to 45 minutes, especially food. So we are trying to push our partners, SMEs, to realize that, okay, guys, we really need to cook it fast in order to satisfy the need. And also the couriers also don't want to wait and waste their time, right? Waiting the orders. So we also need to optimize their waiting times and the times when they do actually take them to deliver from pickup point to the delivery point. So every stage we are trying to optimize our times in order to really boost the delivery times in the local market. So those are the overall challenges. And yeah, and overall, I mean, e-commerce in Kyrgyzstan, I think there is a growing recognition of the importance of the market. Most of the SMEs are trying to use and switch to digital channels to enhance their sales. And we see this growing interest in accessing these global platforms like Amazon, Wildberries, and a lot of knowledge is the huge demand to get such kind of knowledge, to get those platforms and successfully sell on those platforms. Because I mean, there are platforms and tools over there, but it doesn't mean you're going to be successful from day one, right? You also have to discover, understand how that platforms are being operated, what are the approaches will help you to boost. So we still lack this understanding and knowledge in the local market, how to boost online sales using the existing platforms. And we've been just several years ago, as Kati mentioned, I have been leading the e-commerce association, and we have launched several initiatives. First is, of course, to provide the regulatory framework for the e-commerce business, to support local entrepreneurs, and to probably launch some tax incentives even to support, because it's a high-risk industry, right? You never know if especially in these small markets where the density of population is low, and the market itself is low, right? So you cannot scale your operation to that stage that the return on investment would be right immediately provided. There is also it is not like additional advantage of having this density of population like we have in the mature growing markets. So one of the areas we can boost is actually try to help our SMEs to get the global markets, right, where the high populations are there. And yeah, and of course, we need to provide support to those SMEs. And one of the ideas was first, in addition to any tax incentives, we also have to grow and develop internal infrastructure. And one of the ideas was to launch the e-commerce park in Kyrgyzstan. And e-commerce park is like a one-stop shop for e-commerce entrepreneurs who can actually be resident there, get all the services right immediately for themselves, share some of the costs like call center, like fulfillment centers and that kind of stuff. So that is still not launched in Kyrgyzstan yet. And I believe this is something very important to do in order to share the required infrastructure for entrepreneurs. And this is just the first step. Second step is actually get connected all those e-commerce parks between countries, right? To build these trade corridors between countries, negotiations and some, to boost this e-commerce delivery and exchange of knowledge and understanding how to successfully operate in not only in the local markets, but in the markets you want to reach. So yeah, a lot of things still needs to be done. And I think as an association, we have delivered the right messages to our government, and the government is trying to do some tangible steps. First is at least to support with the law, which will give some tax incentives for e-commerce players. And secondly, also attract some probably international players like Alibaba or someone who can co-invest to e-commerce parks and bring and develop the right infrastructure for entrepreneurs, where the entrepreneurs will also get the new education, right? How to reach the global markets, and where all the service providers like logistics platforms, marketing platforms can also be like allocated next door and help entrepreneurs in one community, in one ecosystem to collaborate with each other and help each other. Yeah, I think this is it from my side. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
That's wonderful, Aikanush. Thank you for the very comprehensive look, and you're obviously at the heart of creating the e-commerce economy in the region with Glovo, and all this training and capacity building you're also doing for SMEs for them to learn about e-commerce. And then these ideas about all the way to the regional level, how we can integrate the digital markets and bring e-commerce markets more together, including through the e-commerce parks, is fantastic ideas. And we'll probably come back to you on some of these. How you managed to do some of this training also to SMEs is fantastic to learn from your experience. But I'll turn for now to Mirza. So Mirza Sokurov is the Strategy and Operations Director at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you, Mirza, for joining us at a relatively short notice. Very much appreciate your time, and we'd love to hear your views and reflections on the prior panelists and your take on e-commerce in Central Asia, and specifically wanted to give in your expertise on kind of global markets as well as the regional markets. Do you see disruptions coming from big international players in the Central Asian e-commerce market going forward? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kati. And I'm very happy to greet all the forum participants, and I'm honored to be with you today. So today I wanted to, as what Kati mentioned, I wanted to build my discussion around three key messages. My first message is about the global e-commerce trends and its impact on trade and economic development in our region. Yeah, but as Aikanush noted, today 1 out of 5 global purchases are done through the internet. And if we measure this in money, then the total size of global e-commerce market is $4.8 trillion now. That's a huge market. And if we look forward, our research shows that the e-com market share would grow from the current 19% to 22 to 23% of all the trade which will happen. So in next 4 years, actually the e-com market is expected to reach 6.4 billion. This means that e-com market will get bigger by 1/3 in next 4 years. That's a huge growth. And if we think about what drives this growth, then as previous panelists mentioned also, there are 4 factors that support this. First is clearly availability of mobile equipment and internet. I will not stop here. I think it's very clear and self-explanatory. Yeah. The second thing is the increasing number of online shops and the traditional players moving to internet. This includes you and me. Yeah, we all experience that. And the third element is the simplification of online payments. I think in Kazakhstan, we have clearly experienced it with Kaspi in last few years, and now other banks are also catching up, and online payments are becoming very easy. And at last, but not the least, I think this is probably most critical part, yeah, the availability of cheaper, faster logistics with wider territory coverage. This is the most, I think, critical success factor in our region. So the global trends would drive the e-com in Central Asia. This is already kind of reflected in how quickly the e-com is growing in our region. Yeah, I can just noted that. The second message is about the capacity of our market and the key challenges of Central Asian e-com. So Aikanush covered the Kyrgyzstan, so I wanted to focus on Kazakhstan example, and I'm a bit proud as PwC is one of the few firms who actually does the electronic commerce market research, and we publish it regularly. So very happy to share just the recent notes from that. So if we look at Kazakhstan, our e-com market size reached $1 billion in the first half of 2021. Till the end of the year, the dynamics would continue, so we expect it to exceed $2 billion. If we compare it with the last year, it was 1.4 billion. Then this means that even in Kazakhstan, the e-com market would grow by half. Yeah, given this growth, well, this is a huge demand, and how local players are actually developing. So, I think it's true for all Central Asia that marketplaces here are actually represented mostly by banks, fintech companies, and other e-com companies, and they are actually now building the integrated ecosystems with kind of a triangle. In top, you have the marketplace and e-com. Then you have the financial services, like when you buy now, yeah, and pay later, yeah. And the third element is the logistics and delivery. Yeah, Steve clearly noted on this. And this year, players who have not mastered the e-com in 2020, they are actually running to this train and actually jumping on that train this year. Yeah. If we talk about the key challenges, then our e-com players, for our latest research, clearly indicated that the increased cost of logistics and the challenges of the last mile delivery, and I think most panelists clearly indicated that, yes, is the critical success factor. So what's just taking a step back, what's important in our, for example, Kazakhstan e-com market is that the share of electronic commerce in the overall trade is 5 to 7%. If we compare it with the kind of Iconesh noted global 20% benchmark, then you can see the huge potential. Yeah, the Kazakhstan market, and it's applicable to all Central Asia markets actually, that it has a potential to triple in size as we will develop. So my second message, just to sum up, is that there is a huge growth potential in our markets, and I know and I truly believe that e-com would be one of those industries which will get notable investments in upcoming years in Central Asia. Now, my third message is about the government support and policy measures that are necessary to facilitate e-com and trade growth. Stephen has already covered part of it, so I wanted to focus on probably 5 best practice support measures that are based on our recent research. Yeah, first is clearly the analytical support and measures in finding foreign partners. Yeah, I mean for the export facilitation. The very good example is United States and the Export.gov site, which this is a very good example and very good tool actually to help American exporters to kind of increase their trade. And if we come back to Central Asia, I had an honor to work with Kaztrade and the Ministry of Trade of Kazakhstan on accelerating the non-resource-based Kazakhstan products to China and Russia. And just wanted to underline that on the Kazakhstan example, the measures in place are actually comparable in nature, but it should be kind of strengthened and continued further. So the second is support with access to foreign e-com platforms. Like, for example, a good example is Chile, Spain, and I think our governments are also helping on that. The third measure is the infrastructure support. So, and this is, I think, again, clearly the most important part here, resolving the logistics matters to reach the foreign countries. And Stephen also clearly covered this as the importance of this. Then the marketing promotion in foreign countries. Mexico is doing this. It's a great example. And in our countries, we also have this marketing promotion and trade missions that we see in Uzbekistan, in Kazakhstan, in Kyrgyzstan, and I think this should continue. And the fifth element is financial support. So partial financing or full financing of measures to place Kazakhstan producers to foreign electronic commerce platforms. And summing it up, so the governments in our region have this nature of these support measures, but they should be extended. And if we sum up all the three messages that I discussed, then global trends would clearly impact the e-com and the trade in Central Asia very soon in upcoming years. The Central Asian electronic commerce market has significant upside potential, and we should focus in terms of success factors on logistics. And the third is that the governments should continue putting efforts on trade support measures to strengthen the e-com and trade in Central Asia. Thank you very much. And despite the little time left, I'll be looking forward to our discussion during the Q&A part. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Minister. That was very concise and filled with great messages and great comparative experiences as well. I'm personally very predisposed to the Latin American experiences as well. I think they are very applicable to this region, and it was great to hear about this coverage that you've had scanning the world for good practices. We have a little bit of time here. I don't see any questions from the audience, but please type or put in the chat if you have questions. You can put in Russian or English and we'll figure it out one way or the other. I wanted to go back to Steve. Steve, you mentioned various reform ideas and good practices that you would prescribe to countries, but what are some cases where you've seen countries implement there? Are there some good examples for this region to follow, perhaps on the inbound side, or treatment of taxes and customs procedures as well? And are there perhaps some bad cases to avoid, if you want to name and shame?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Kati. So, firstly, I'll start with the customs modernization programs. And I think a key example is the work we did with Montenegro. In fact, we presented with that at the WCO last December. That was a pre-arrival processing project where we introduced risk profiling. It was financed by the German government and worked together with a number of other organizations. And so what we did there, we worked on risk management and risk profiling in Montenegro with the Montenegrin customs. The outcome was that obviously we could clear shipments much quicker. SMEs that were involved were able to import quicker. But I think one of the key things is that the Montenegrin customs were able to report the revenue went up because compliance went up and volumes went up. So I think that's a key thing. So very often, this change from sort of command and control to trade facilitation is not always easy. And in the administration, when I was in the British Customs, I remember we had this change, and it was quite difficult. It was difficult for me to get a grip initially and to understand, okay, well, what is the benefit? And of course, you see it in the longer term. But I think that's a good one where the revenue went up for Montenegro, and also SMEs were saying actually it was easier for them as well. In terms of trade facilitation in general with SMEs, we're involved in a number of programs with USAID, with yourself, Kati, and with ITC as well. I know are a part of this as well, particularly with ITC at the moment on the She Trades program, which is empowering female SMEs, for those that don't know. And what we're seeing is that, through a number of training programs that we've engaged in, where we've managed to upskill SMEs and also show them the market potential, we've seen some good successes in terms of the the growth that they've seen and the access. I think there's two classic examples that we showed from Africa is Malamon dolls and what's it called? Malama, I think it is, shea butter. So one was producing dolls in South Africa and the other one was producing shea butter beauty products. And both of those, they started with us through the training program and are now exporting. I think in terms of in terms of other ambitions that we have, and as you say, around the tax program, what we've seen, I think the key one that we've seen at the moment is, and I think this is an example, is those countries that moved to digital very, very quickly with COVID, and that helped them enormously. And there you see that. And those that didn't, we did see some issues. So in terms of taxation of e-commerce, I think the best example that I would recommend is the Australian model. Australia took some time to really have a look at how you tax e-commerce, and for countries looking for revenue, particularly now during an economic downturn, they're often looking at, well, if people are buying goods from overseas, how do I tax them when I used to sell them in a shop and collect the VAT or the GST? Well, you can do it. You just need to find a way to collect it away from the border so that customs are only involved in safety and security. And this is something that Australia have done, and Australia have done it in a way that supports SMEs in developed and least developed economies. The Australians actually looked at the burden at non-tariff barriers, and they've introduced a system where they've matched the de minimis limit. So the de minimis limit is the level below which you don't collect any taxes, and they've also matched it to the so-called threshold limit. That's the revenue turnover you need to generate before you need to register for GST in Australia. And what they've seen is a massive growth in revenue, but also a growth in SMEs being able to target them. Because literally, if you're in, say, for example, in Kazakhstan, you want to export to Australia, all you have to do is go online and register. And you get a tax identification number. And then you basically, you submit a declaration at the end later on. I think it's monthly. And then you basically transfer money by IBAN. I don't know if it's still extent. Mirza might know because PwC have seen this before. At one point, you were able to actually pay the tax by credit card. If you have a credit card, Australia enabled you to pay with a credit card. I don't know if it's still there. I'm assuming it still is. But they've just made it very, very easy. And what they've seen is receipts, tax receipts have been well ahead of forecast. So I think that's a good example. And also it's a good example for policy officials in countries that have an export strategy. How easy is it? You know, it's still fairly easy to export to the US. And Mirza mentioned the US. And, you know, because they have a high level of de minimis. But, you know, I'm not going to name and shame. But one of the things I am going to point out is there are a number of economies that have introduced registration requirements and bureaucracy that just make it really, really difficult. And when you compare the bureaucracy for an exporter, say for example to Kazakhstan, to that region, there is a far bigger burden on that exporter than there is for the domestic retailers, and it's absolutely huge because it's being done on a transactional basis, and there are other legal requirements where we're being told already by SMEs it's just impossible for them to export there because they can't afford it. So, you know, we're trying to help in that, as you know, Kati. But I think, you know, in terms of ambition, the customs reforms often take time, and you know, with yourselves and with USAID, we have a lot of ambition there. And for those here who haven't asked any questions, you know, you've got a good panel here, and Kati is a global expert on this subject. She's written a fantastic book on the paradigm shift to e-commerce, and she's addressed absolutely everything. So, you know, if you're on this call, as Kati said, please submit questions, not just to me, but to the other panel that you've got, because this is a really golden opportunity. Because the one thing about e-commerce is knowing how to do it. And once you know the rules of the game, it's really, really easy. So thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you for the endorsement as well. I'll pose a final question to Aikanush and Mirza. There's a question from the audience, Alfred Fernandez, asking which areas will be suitable for foreign companies to participate in e-commerce in Central Asia. I think you might be referring to sectors and so on. What contributions other than financial resources and technology transfer can foreign companies bring in to accelerate e-commerce activities? So yeah, not only sectors, but what other contribution, what capabilities can foreign companies bring? That's an interesting question. Do you have views on that, Mirza or Aikanush? Please, Aikanush.
Yeah, this is quite very interesting and very challenging question, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because I mean, e-commerce is an area where it's so hard to predict it. Which is it going to provide that return of investment that you expect to have, and within which time period you expect, right? Because it really depends from the market potential and capacity. In terms of Kyrgyzstan, I think, I mean, a lot of areas and industries in Kyrgyzstan are not digitalized yet, right? So a lot of services like could be digitalized, and that is a huge room for an opportunity there to bring to come and bring new innovation solutions and efficiency. I think what additional value such kind of platforms can bring into local market is actually to boost this mentality, you know, ordering online, because it's something we are fighting and investing a lot at this stage with these marketing promotions to push customers do their first orders and then provide that good level of customer satisfaction so that they will stay with us and make sure that they are coming back and generating the rest of the orders. So probably as much platforms we have in the local market, the faster we will educate the market and boost the understanding that e-commerce has much more benefits, potential, and probably customers will more switch to online orders than the retail, because it is overall trend, right? So we also have to make sure that locally we have enough platforms who is actually giving that level of service that is expecting customers, but at the same time, these platforms who are helping the SMEs to go online, right? Providing the platform for that SMEs right tools to get to reach online orders from day one. So this is, I think, important.
Yeah, and I could add maybe a few things to what Aikanush mentioned. It's clearly the value that foreign players can bring to our markets. I think in terms of the key value is the way the business is done. Yeah, I think this is very important. I mean, in terms of the processes, how they are organized. Currently, our local e-com players and marketplaces are still in the development stage. So the processes are being developed, and the culture in those marketplaces are still kind of at the developing stage. I think in terms of success of bringing the customers to the marketplace, bringing the customers to the idea that they should buy and can buy more online, is the easiness of the platform and convenience of the platform. I think the foreign players who focus, and there are many of them, who focus not on everything. Yeah, our platforms are trying to do everything. You can buy many different stuff, but those platforms, foreign platforms, who can bring one thing, but with a very good quality and focused value, those platforms actually have a good chance of succeeding in our region. So that's, I think, the key point that foreign players should consider when considering to entering this region.
Fantastic. Those were really great answers and tough question, but excellent advice as well. We unfortunately have to close our panel. We had such a great panel. We could spend probably the next day talking with these three experts. They are just wonderful, full of great advice. We covered in this panel everything from the final 50 feet, it's called, to the last mile, to the middle mile, to customs, and then digital integration among the Central Asian countries. And we've heard great advice, great examples from different parts of the world on how Central Asian economies can improve all these different parts. And of course, the infrastructure issue is fundamental that every panelist brought up. Steve spoke a great deal about digitizing border processes, risk management, and of course, implementing the trade facilitation agreement as well, and many other themes, such as averting these non-tariff measures, whether it's in your own market or foreign markets. And Aikanush and Minister also shared a lot of actionable advice on how to help small businesses use marketplaces as well as learn to operate in the e-commerce environment. So this was a very rich panel, very filled with advice in an hour. And I appreciate all the panelists and welcome everybody to give a virtual applause if you want. So thank you very much for joining us and have a great afternoon.
Thanks a lot, Kati. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. I believe we'll be straight going to our next panel, since we're kind of having two panels in one period of 2 hours. So I'm very pleased to welcome our next panel. We have Pasha Karim, who is the Regional Manager for Global Link Logistics, Geshi Laksula, who is Business Lead for EURIDI, and Erika Libertelli, who is the Executive Director of the E-Commerce Institute, joining us. Unfortunately, we had at the last minute, Muzaffar Karabayev had to drop out, so we apologize for that. But I believe we have three very, very substantive speakers who will have a lot to say, and we want to turn to them next in the next 45, 50 minutes. We'll be talking in particular in this panel about the kind of business and technology opportunities for Central Asian businesses to streamline their e-commerce logistics, warehousing, supply chains, and to become more interoperable with other players in the logistics ecosystems. We'll also pick up on the topic that panelists in the prior session talked about, which is the capacity for small businesses or even mid-sized businesses to learn how to do e-commerce, something that Erika is an expert on, having cultivated the ecosystem in Latin America for e-commerce for the past 20 years and doing a lot of work also now in Central Asia, bringing all the lessons learned to the region. So this is a very diverse panel as the prior one, focusing on practical use cases to solve challenges for Central Asian companies that are looking to engage in trade, whether they are small or large, as well as, of course, governments that are enabling this trade. So I wanted to, before, rather than presenting anything further, turn directly to Pasha. Pasha, you're with Global Link Logistics. Global Link operates everywhere in Central Asia and services a diverse range of customers, as I understand, different businesses that are oftentimes exporting beyond their borders. And I wonder if you can share a little bit more about your kind of day-to-day business. What do you see out there with your clients? What are the challenges that they are wrestling with now in the kind of COVID environment, as well as they are thinking about their e-commerce strategy, and whether you have some good kind of cases and examples to share with us on some of the services that you have provided. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks. Greetings to everyone. Thanks for having us here. Basically, yes, as you mentioned, Kati, Global Link is present in Kazakhstan, throughout the CIS, Central Asia. We are providing a one-stop solution by all transport modes, as well as customs clearance, warehousing, like we spoke in the last, mentioned in the last presentation about last mile deliveries and a complete door-to-door service. In terms of challenges, as mentioned, whether I think it's e-commerce related or just the regular old-fashioned way of moving goods from one place to the other, obviously there is room for infrastructure development, infrastructure improvement, whether it's going to be a good e-platform or whether it's a good warehousing solution. So we have those challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges is that we are a landlocked country, so that is going to create delays in terms of transit times. And then, like in any business, it's all about volumes. So you have a good e-platform, you have a good solution, but do you have the kind of volume which will help you to grow and to further develop it? And I think lastly, one of the, I guess it's not so much of a challenge as something which needs to be worked on, would be the customs regulations, conformity, making it a little bit more simpler. And especially if we're talking about e-commerce, I mean, you know, there is a limit as to how much you can, let's say, order online. So there's a lot of things which are there. It is being worked on, obviously, but it is going to take time. So as also mentioned earlier, there's no overnight solution. I think, yes, simplification of the process, making it easier, less hurdles to jump over. And, you know, at the end of the day, it all comes down to cost. So, you know, is a solution possible? Certainly. Given current setups, there are solutions. But do they fit the customer's requirements? Do they fit their transit time needs, their deadline requirements? So there's a lot of different things which have to be considered. The solutions are there, but we need to, it's at this stage, we don't have one for all solution. Everything has to be case by case. So in short.
Fantastic. What are you seeing, just to pick up a little bit,
Yeah.
what are you seeing with your clients now in the kind of COVID environment? Have you seen some changes over the past couple of years in you know, orders or in the business that you do? Are there changes, or is it more kind of business as usual, perhaps with somewhat different constraints than before? Or does this affect them at all?
No, I mean, obviously there have been changes. I mean, you've seen it over even before COVID. Before COVID, we saw customers switching more from the air freight mode of transport to more trucking. Rail started to pick up. People were looking for alternatives, and that sort of paid off for those who went on that mode, because during COVID, the air industry got hit the hardest. I mean, you had rates going from, you know, hypothetically from 50 cents to $5. That's a massive amount. Being a landlocked country, ocean is always going to be an issue. So trucking was something which really started picking up. And because of that, you also saw a lot on the warehousing side. You saw warehousing starting to come up. There's not that many Class A type warehouses. So you've seen customers are looking at setting up hubs in different regions, trying to service the region from one or two locations. It doesn't have to be in the same country. So we have seen growth in terms of customers. We are servicing oil and gas, we're servicing mining, agriculture, spare parts, pharma, FMCG. So certain industries sort of not slumped, but they did drop. Construction went down slightly, oil and gas was a little bit in the middle, but FMCG, pharma, spare parts, those sort of went up. So it's been a bit of both, actually, yes. So especially given the COVID situation, you did see more pharma and FMCG, if to pick two, which really grew.
That's very interesting. And then what you're seeing at the borders is this kind of different standards that countries seem to apply for facilitating trade. And you know, the ideal would be to have a much more unified border clearance process, as I understood from your comment on simplifying.
Correct, because it just makes it that much easier for shipments to transit. Because if you're coming to Kazakhstan, for example, and if you're coming from Europe, you're going to end up going to 3 to 4 borders. Coming from China, not such an issue. There's just one border and you're over. But there are, you know, customs documentation is very important. It's the way it's very different from a declaration here is obviously going to be different from one in the EU. It's totally, you know, miles apart. So a lot of attention has to be paid to the HS codes, to any dual purposes, potential dual purposes of the item. Are there any conformity certificates which have to be arranged in advance? So there's a lot of things like this. And then also, since we speak about the border, I think one thing from COVID, what we've seen is there has been a big congestion at the borders, because you've got COVID practices and different things, and so the borders are currently congested, and that's, you know, that's spilled over onto the rail side as well, and obviously it's going to cause delays and create make the costs go up.
Very good. Very much what Steve was saying, that the Autobahn, so to speak, is quite clogged in global trade.
Correct, because you know, trucks are sitting there. If they're sitting there for normal, let's say, would be 3 to 5 days. If now we're looking at about 7 to 10 at a minimum, I mean, you know, that cost is going to end up going somewhere. The customer cannot afford to take it on themselves, so that in turn will spill over and everywhere. I mean, we did full truckloads from China to Europe during the pandemic, and it went very well. But then, because of congestions of the border, if the entire transit from, let's say, China to Germany took 21 days, that's about the minimum time that the truck was spending at the border now. So,
Wow.
and if the cost was 1,000, it went up to 5. So, I mean, you know, certain, that's one of the things. And, you know, given the current situation, that is obviously going to affect everything. And then also, you know, once again, it all comes back to volumes.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is very interesting to hear that this, you know, these border processes, alongside perhaps with some other factors, are now clogging the global trading system and really affecting. It's interesting to hear about the prices that you quote, because these are huge costs for sellers, obviously, and eating the margins. I'm based in Los Angeles, and our port here is notoriously clogged, and ships are the same as trucks waiting to enter Germany. They're waiting here to come to the port, and it's a really a disaster situation for the retailers that are buying for holidays. So that's a very useful concrete examples that you're providing about the need to have clearer border processes, and of course these more interoperable border processes in the region. I wanted to turn to Geshe next, because Geshe is an expert on interoperability. You have been working now in a number of months at EuroDI, and of course you have a career in logistics, very experienced in managing logistics issues in Europe and in Eastern Europe and different parts of the world as well. You gave in a prior presentation fantastic examples of your work and EuroDI's work in Eastern Europe, and probably also in the Estonia, Baltics, and so forth. And wanted to learn more about Geshe, about EuroDI, for those that are not familiar with your company and the kinds of services you provide, and some use cases perhaps that you have been driving. I see some emails from you and your company every now and then, and there are fantastic collaborations and partnerships that you have established and new clients every single time. So we're very excited to hear the latest, and of course, those who haven't heard yet will be a fantastic presentation. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Kati, and also to all the other organizers for the possibility to be here in the panel today. And very interesting also the earlier panel and the discussion so far in this panel regarding digitalization of e-commerce, or e-commerce obviously being already digital commerce, and the supply chain challenges around this. And what today I would like to focus a bit on is basically what is required to make all of this happen. So how to make use of the data, how to make the processes digital. And this is a topic that I think quite often is a bit forgotten, because it's maybe not the most prominent topic. So we talk a lot about platforms, you know, like the major marketplaces of commerce. We talk about platforms for data sharing. We also talk a lot about technologies that are used in these platforms. We talk about blockchain and the cloud and these kind of things, which are all very relevant, and we in EuroDI are definitely embracing all of them, as I'll explain in a bit. But what we don't talk so much about is data connectivity. So in order to have digital commerce, you need to connect obviously several different players to each others, and we're talking about a network of depending of course on the market and the use case, on tens, hundreds, thousands, sometimes, you know, close to a million of different players that you need to connect to each other to drive e-commerce effectively. And this is something that today I thought I could share a few examples of. So EuroDI is a global a leading player in global trade and supply chain data connectivity. And we have been doing this, or have been developing our services in this field since now almost 10 years. And I will give you a few examples of customers that we are working with, or use cases that we have digitized. And also very briefly about my background, I've been, as Kati said, now with a year with the company, and previous to that have been 10 years already in the log tech software industry, working with electronic TMSs, delivery management systems, these kind of solutions. And prior to that, actually working in the supply chain and the logistics industry in various roles. But very briefly about UEDI. So we are, as mentioned, a data connectivity solution for rapidly growing trade and supply chain digitalization needs. And what does that mean? So we are actually connecting the dots of the different supply chain members of the different platforms and different technologies here. We are, I mentioned the topic of, cloud versus traditional solutions. So we are a cloud service. We have a platform as a service, an integration platform as a service that we have built over the course of 10 years. We are using Microsoft Azure technology to do that. But that is basically a technicality for us. So what is much more important is that we help customers to really digitize their use cases in a concrete way, in a fully managed service way. To talk a bit about the scope, we're handling millions of transactions every day and on a global scale. So we have offices in Europe, in Finland, actually, we are physically located, and in the US. But for us, that doesn't really matter because our customers are located globally, and in a supply chain context, that is, of course, very important. We are not only connecting different types of supply chain members, we are also connecting the different worlds of technology. And that means both traditional EDI type electronic data interchange, so traditional types of data sharing, but also modern APIs, which is a very, very hot topic, I guess, mentioned in supply chain and e-commerce continuously. We do have, in addition to the technology, the industry expertise. So all of our staff has basically background with in a supply chain context, and I think that's very important for successfully delivering these kind of solutions. Here's a few examples of companies that we are working with and whose processes we have been digitizing. And I guess several of these brands you obviously recognize. They are leading players in their industry, Fortune 500 companies, like the largest fashion retailer in the world, Inditex, the largest ocean carrier, Maersk. But these are just a few examples. We also work quite a lot actually with local regional companies, as Kati mentioned, for instance, with Baltic players, also Eastern European. We have, for instance, several SME trucking companies that we have helped connect to larger ecosystems and networks. This is e-commerce is a main topic today, as you can see here. Some of the largest global e-commerce players are also here in the picture. We have connected them, for instance, with the local posts of Northern Europe as some example for use cases. And what I think is another good topic that came up a couple of times in today's panels is really intermodality. So there's a lot cooking now with different platforms and different technologies emerging, but quite often they're focused on one modality, so that you have, for instance, in ocean shipping, a platform, you have the last mile solution providers that are really focusing on an efficient execution of orders and track and trace. But what we have also seen, especially now in the last 2 years during the COVID crisis, is where you're moving from one modality to the other. I think the previous speaker also mentioned about that where when prices are really skyrocketing and you have you're going from air to trucking, right? You are really faced with the challenge of how to do this in practice, right? How do you get your orders transmitted if you have previously always been doing this in a platform for air connectivity? How do you then get the tracking on board, or how to switch from ocean to air? These kind of things, and that's where I think we have focused on a lot. So really bringing in together the different platforms and players. and yeah, handling basically everything from schedules to orders to track and trace and invoices. So we really felt that there has been a niche in this area that hasn't been targeted. I don't know, Kati, is there still some time left or?
Oh, absolutely. Please,
yeah.
please. Yeah, you have 10 minutes if you want.
Okay, great.
Yeah, please.
Yeah,
please.
but since there has been a lot of talks about platforms, we do work a lot with platforms. We are ourselves not the platform, so we are just like connecting the dots of the different players. We're doing the dirty work of connecting different systems and businesses to each other, if you can call it like that. A bit the plumbing, the infrastructure of digital commerce. But we do obviously cooperate with platforms. This here is an example of the TradeLens, which is a joint venture between Maersk and IBM. And I guess it's fair to say that they are aiming at becoming the prime global commerce and ocean shipping platform. They are a blockchain technology. So one of these really hot topics of current digital commerce is implemented in there, or their platform is based on that. But we are helping them as a technology provider. So we are doing both the kind of main connectivities between the joint venture partners and all of their backend system. But we are also onboarding their trading partners. And in these kind of ecosystems, obviously the number of trading partners can skyrocket very quickly. So you have all the different carriers from the different modalities. You have the shippers, you have the BCOs, you have the authorities, customs and other authorities that you somehow need to onboard on these platforms. And even though this picture looks really nice and easy, going from these kind of point-to-point integrations to a common platform, it's really about the how to do this, right? Okay, you can offer a graphical user interface, and then all the smaller players can key in their orders and can track their shipments by using the GUI, so to say. But if you have just slightly higher volumes, this is not a feasible type of usage or use case. So you need to actually connect a lot of systems of a lot of players doing this. And yeah, that's one of the cases that we have been working with a lot since the last 3 to 4 years. So have basically gone from being the technology provider to the platform to also productifying to connect to platforms like this. And this is, I think, a good example of things that we do also for SME companies or startups in new geographies, in new industries, to have a really good and efficient way to get onboarded on these kind of global platforms. But it doesn't have to be the largest shipping platform, and you don't have to be the largest solution provider to work with us. This is another example of a recent use case that we have had, which is a Romanian trucking company that is our customer here in this solution, where we have helped them to connect to one of their largest end customers, which is a $20 billion US dollar multinational company in the tech product industry. They have a 3PL service provider, a similar company as to one of the panelists here presenting here today. So they are handling their warehouse. I think it's in Central Europe. And so then for the last mile, they have a third basically party involved here to do some distribution in the UK, a larger company than they themselves were. So this was all about how to connect 4 different players in the most efficient way to each other. And I think we have found a very good solution to really connect an SME trucking company to one of the largest tech companies in this case. But yeah, I think there might be some questions regarding other use cases or technologies. I'm very, very happy to take any questions. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Geshe. Very interesting and great progress just in the span of a few months since I last saw this presentation. What are the things that you have observed with your clients or companies that approach you for this service? What are there some things that they should be more prepared for instance? What are the lessons? Are they, for instance, have they considered the technology? Have they considered all the things that they have to do themselves before they get on this journey? Or how do you see this these first steps when a company wants to start to integrate itself more into the ecosystem?
Yeah, I think there's one concrete point where I see there's a lot of kind of need for education or for kind of emphasizing of the reality, and that is, we're talking a lot about cloud technology, and in data connectivity that means basically APIs, so programming interfaces, which basically means cloud-based data integration. And they are all nice, and all of the platforms have their APIs, but the reality is that most of the participants of the supply chain, including the leading logistics companies, the leading BCOs, shippers, retailers, e-tailers, and manufacturing companies, they're still in a hybrid mode where their ERP systems and other important systems are on premise. So they are basically not yet capable to exchange data in API format, and for some startups in the industry also, it's obviously they can start with an API right away, but then if they want to communicate with one of these bigger companies or service providers, they need to adapt, and that actually quite often is a huge task. It's not as easy. Or even if there is two systems that both have a modern cloud-based API, translating between these two is also work that needs to be that you need to have the resources for, both the time and the skills. It's a bit like a language translation. So in order to effectively communicate in a global or international scale like this, for instance, you need to have a common language and do the translation at least from one into the other. And that's the same for data connectivity.
Very interesting. We have a hand up here from Ashur Sarabin. Please, you're welcome to ask your question if you have one. Maybe he typed here as well. Oh, we have two questions. So Mr. Zarabin, please.
I'm trying to also see whether I see the written question here.
Yes, so there's a question, will a lot of training be required for your clients? What backup systems are available when there are hiccups? That's a good question.
Yes, so that's a very good question. So regarding the training, I very quickly mentioned that this is a fully managed service concept. That means that even though we have this technical platform in iPaaS in this case, our end customers very seldomly have to interact with that platform. So it's really like a black box solution. And we can train in that solution like the technical experts of our customers, but quite often we just do it in the background, so that there's no need actually to be trained in the platform. Rather, you can continue to use your own tools, and that's the essence actually of this. So you can remain in your own ERP system or your transport management system or whatever is your main system, and we are connecting then your trading partners through our platform, but you don't have to interact with the platform. And yeah, the second part of the question was the training, and then could you repeat?
What backup systems are available?
Yes.
When there's hiccups?
Yes, exactly. So I guess hiccups quite often in data connectivity means like a loss of connection. So obviously, like always in cloud commerce, you need to have an internet connection that's really a must, and a stable one. There we cannot really help if there's no internet connection, but otherwise, since our data is both secured and also backed up twice in several different virtual locations, and we are using the leading cloud technology Azure, so I think there's many different echelons basically of backup and data security, very reliable. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you. So please, audience, if you have questions, please just put in the Q&A box or chat box, and we'll pick them up, and they can be in Russian, no problem. We'll translate them as we go. So please just join us in asking questions from the speakers. Thank you, Geshe. That was fantastic presentation, and we look forward to hearing more, perhaps in the next few minutes. For now, I'll turn to Erika. Erika Libertelli is joining us from Buenos Aires. Thank you, Erika, for being up early. I know it's early for your time.
Hello, everyone. Hello,
and,
everyone. Thank you, Katy.
Wanted to introduce Erika very quickly. So Erika is the executive director of the E-Commerce Institute in Buenos Aires. And this organization has been a key player in creating the Latin American e-commerce ecosystem. They have, among other things, organized every year for many, many years, something called e-commerce days in every single Latin American country. Erika has been leading this work. And today they are working with international donors, including USAID, number of projects to bring their lessons learned from Latin America to other parts of the world, including Central Asia. And something to say, the E-Commerce Institute has probably the best course catalog, certainly the best course catalog I have seen of any organization anywhere in the world to train SMEs to do e-commerce and complete the various things that the prior panel was talking about, like servicing the client more efficiently and then going cross-border as well. So they have a fantastic experience also in that regard, and having trained thousands of firms across Latin America, and now taking this lesson and practices to other countries around the world. And so, Erika, thank you for joining, and we'd love to hear more about your experience in Latin America, what you have learned in this long journey that you've been on in cultivating the regional e-commerce ecosystem. What have you learned in training companies, and what are you doing here in Central Asian context, enabling companies with the support of FGI and USAID to use e-commerce to sell locally as well as regionally?
Excellent. Thank you, Katy, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure for me to be part of this important event. I'm Erika Libertelli. I'm Executive Director of Latin America E-Commerce Institute. And I have a presentation. So give me a second to share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen? Yes?
Perfect, Erika. Yep.
Excellent, excellent. I am going to talk about E-Commerce Institute and its progress in Central Asia. E-Commerce Institute is a non-profit organization, a regional organization that develops and supports a digital economy in Latin America countries to promote initiatives that consolidate online businesses and improve skills, digital trade skills, in order to professionalize the ecosystem. Currently, the main institutions in the region, such as chambers of e-commerce or electronic commerce and organizations related to the digital economy in Latin America, are part of its network. We are an union of chambers and associations, a public and private union. And E-Commerce Institute is also working increasingly with government, international donors, and multilateral entities such as USAID and E-Trade Alliance. So it's a pleasure for me to bring Latin America to Central Asia. And I heard that you mentioned Latin America in another panel, so I am very proud of this. Our main training initiatives. Firstly, I would share with you our main training initiatives. For example, E-Commerce Day. E-Commerce Day is a networking and training event with the aim of accelerating and making the online businesses more professional. It's a great event. It's the most important event in Latin America. It's held in 18 countries. It has more than 40,000 attendees and 900 speakers per year, being the most relevant event in the Latin American digital commerce sector. You can see all the countries that E-Commerce Day is held. Then we have a regional training and certification unit for us, it's very important the training of the sector, the improve of skills. So offers a full set of courses to entrepreneurs, employees of major businesses, CEOs, and board members. They are based on online, in-person, and blended learning, some of these in alliance with most important universities in the region. The e-commerce institute also has a regional scholarship program in order to train a great number of students and professionalize the ecosystem. So you can see we have short intensive courses, senior and executive programs, master and specialization, e-commerce specialist certification, train the trainers, and more initiatives. You can see here some of our courses, training in different levels and areas. We offer courses for fashion sector, tourism, massive consume, pharma and cosmetic, agribusiness, retail, etc. for different knowledge levels. At the start level, middle level, C-level, we have an excellent academic offer. And at this moment, we are working in Central Asia. I would like to share with you some input about our work in progress within USAID Future Growth Initiative. The first of all, we did a survey to look for different results about the ecosystem, and I will share with you the main findings so far. We find a beginner stage of the digital maturity in the region and the development growth difference between countries. The lack of accessibility to the internet and the low offer of e-commerce courses in the market decrease the possibility of growth, that online businesses become more professional and the creation of new businesses compared to other parts of the world. Some companies need to adapt their websites to the best practices in the global market, but also we detected some interesting opportunities. We think you have opportunities to grow. You have interesting initiatives that can be taken as the starting point in each country to start an e-commerce community. In e-commerce institute, we believe in e-commerce community. We believe in union of private and public sector. So we think you have excellent opportunities to work together with different organizations and to achieve the e-commerce growth. And obviously, with this, this can collaborate in the creation of digital talent related to digital skills. Okay. Momento. Perfect. The next slide. So our project has general objectives. At this moment, we're designing and providing content for a digital commerce operator course for Central Asian MSMEs that are starting their e-commerce journey. Then we delivering train of the trainers, designing to transfer knowledge of future instructors to deliver this digital commerce operator course. And the results will be 5 countries are involved, 30 participants in the train of the trainers, and 24 organizations will be able to deliver the digital commerce operator course. This will impact on thousands of MSMEs. So it's a great job. By the way, I like to thank to Philippe and all the team of AFGI to collaborate with this, to support me, because we are working together for reach these results. So it's very important to train the trainers, okay? Because when we find, in our findings, we detected that the ecosystem don't have people that have the capabilities to train. So it's important to this course in order to deliver the digital commerce operator course. Okay. Here, for example, are the stages that we follow in order to train to the MSMEs. The stages are technological and business skills and knowledge, platform and commercial strategy definition, adoption of infrastructure, online marketing, knowledge about payment solutions, logistic systems, and customer service. So you can see the roadmap. And finally, I'd like to share with you some recommendations for this ecosystem that we are working. I think it's important to develop the local ecosystem, as I mentioned, to foster the networking, to foster the alliances, measure the e-commerce industry and research on digital trends, offer training for different levels of knowledge and areas, achieve the participation of the main players of the industry, education, learning by doing, delivered by practitioners and digital sector leaders. It's most important that the sector leaders transfer the knowledge. And I think it needs more collaborative models, globalization, international research, and a change mindset. We are working together with AFCI and e-commerce institute to achieve these results. Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you so much, Parol.
Thanks very much, Erika. That's fantastic recommendations. Very much picking up what the prior panel was talking about, the SME capacity and how do we instill that in the region. And you've done this in your region, now bringing this knowledge here. What are your views about, something that you have also emphasized in other parts of the world is the mentorship, that, there's an important part after this train the training or train the trainer and then passing on the knowledge to SMEs. You've been emphasizing the importance of mentorship as well. How do you see this kind of continuing learning for SMEs? How can you describe a little bit examples, for instance, of your mentorship programs?
Yes, for example, we have a mentorship program in Central America. I think this is a similar example of Central Asia. So I think this is a model to continue or to benchmark for Central Asia. Central America, I think it's a similar to this market. So I think it's an example, and I think Central Asia have the opportunity to benchmark to other parts of the world. I think it's important to collaborate with you. Latin America have a developed market, so I think it's important to see this ecosystem in order to copy, smart copy, and to develop your own ecosystem. Yes, we have excellent examples of marketplace, of development of logistics, payment methods, marketing online. So we are working together in order to transfer our knowledge to you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for that presentation, all the work that you're doing. It's really great to bring this knowledge that you have had and built in Latin America to this region, and seeing the seeing the analogies as a colleague, as Mirza was also mentioning, that there are some analogies and lessons learned that could travel from Latin America to this region. I'm sure there are also lessons the other way around, but in this case, you've had great success in Brazil, in Argentina, Mexico now in e-commerce.
Yes,
and hopefully we will be here.
Yes, and these markets are very development. Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, for example. But we have markets lower, for example, Central America, and I think it's a near example of Central Asia. But yes, we have leaders of our industry, how you mentioned.
Excellent. Yeah, very good. And I think with lessons learned like yours, we can really accelerate progress in other regions as well, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We'll do the best, the tested and tried practices, and with people like Aikanush, who's been a leader in the Central Asian e-commerce ecosystem for a long time. If Geshe is still here, I believe yes. Geshe,
yes.
Just a couple of questions before we close. On, Erica was sharing about SMEs and smaller businesses, and you're of course playing with some very impressive names like Alibaba and Maersk and others. But when you think about kind of scaling the integration to smaller businesses, how would you think about that? And have you all kind of you already thought about these solutions for smaller businesses, and also potentially even working with governments that want to enable small businesses at scale? What would be your thoughts on these integrations with small businesses? How feasible are they?
Yes, definitely. So I think that the way how we have tackled this is that we have been looking at productifying specific use cases that we have been seeing over the years that are reoccurring. We package them under a so-called EUREDI Rapids kind of package of different products, and they can be, for instance, an ocean, air, tracking, so visibility into the supply chain use case, where you have the track and trace from logistics service to providers to BCOs, etc., as the essence of the use case. And we package them subscription-based service-wise, so that you have a very clear kind of description of what the service includes, how you can connect to it, how does it interact with your existing system, etc. And you also have a visible and affordable price, so where you can already estimate the cost for the solution, and still it gives you the possibility to tap into one of the major platforms or one of the market leading ecosystems in your specific industry. So I think that is one way how we have tackled it, and there's really no limitation to company size or even IT capabilities of using these services.
So this is something that almost any company in Central Asia, of course, you have to have a certain level of digitization, but beyond that.
Yeah. And what was also quite interesting is if you analyze, how we are communicating with the large players that you mentioned. I mean, you could think that they also have the most modern technology, but actually, it's very often that we are exchanging data with a traditional EDIFACT type of message structure, and some of these messages actually are delivered via email. So I'm not talking about the normal email, but delivering a data set via email technology is quite common, even with bigger players. So don't be shy with any kind of connectivity proposal is one suggestion we have quite often to SMEs. You can suggest anything that works for you currently, be it an EDI, an API, or even sending a data via email.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. And I'm sure people here are able to get in touch with you. And to the extent that we are able to, we could share your presentations, all of you, Erica, Geshe, your presentations with the audience as well. The audience has been very, very patient. Thank you for sticking with us. I know it's the last panel, as I understand, of the day. So thank you for joining and listening to our great presenters. Really appreciate it. Also, all the presentations. And we heard from Pasha about the challenges of logistics moving goods, particularly in the kind of COVID environment where shippers have moved to ground transport, and there are certain challenges, particularly at the border. And the fixes are here. We heard from Steve, from Pasha, and others about the solutions that governments can pursue in order to alleviate these bottlenecks at the borders. And certainly we can, here in Los Angeles, do a better job with our port. We're holding back commerce as well here. So everybody has a role to play. Geshi was talking about the integration of different players in the very fragmented international trade ecosystem into much more interoperable ecosystem, and your EDI is really playing a key role at the heart of that. But not only with the big players, obviously, as you mentioned, you're integrating everybody, smaller businesses as well, through these productified solutions. So it's a really exciting developments going on with your partners and yourselves, like TradeLens, and this integration that you have with them, and enabling all the different players to onboard TradeLens. And Erica finally shared some of her work in Central Asia with building the e-commerce ecosystem, training the trainers, and so on. So Erica, we'll look forward to the results as this program gets going, and as you get the first results, and then hearing about the different experiences that you have. So you're certainly welcome next year also to the Trade Forum and share much more about what you have learned.
Yes, the results of our train of the trainers coming soon. So I am very glad for this and expectant. Yes.
Very good. Let's see if we have Alfred Fernandez is asking one question, if everybody still has time to stay with us. How competitive is your pricing in the offering of your courses? Are you considering setting up your institute in different parts of Asia and spreading the know-how? So now your e-commerce institute is in demand in Asia. I do see that Central Asia will be a very good connector. Other parts of Asia can also benefit from the offerings. So are you, how is the pricing? How competitive are the courses in general? And I guess in this case, USAID is supporting the trainers as well to learn about the solutions. And then how are you thinking about kind of globalizing your offering further as you're now taking your offering from Latin America to the world, as your tagline in the logo says?
Okay, thank you for the question. E-commerce Institute work with a great scholarship program, so our pricing is competitive, and we help to organizations in order to improve the digital trade skills. So the pricing we can adapt to any market, okay? And we will have soon your own courses in Central Asia, because we are training to trainers and training centers in Central Asia with the methodology of E-commerce Institute. So we can be part of your region. But we can keep in touch, and if you have more questions or that, I can reply.
Yeah, and one of the things to highlight that hasn't come up is that E-commerce Institute is rolling out their first English language offering of the cross-border e-commerce program in November, right, Erica? Maybe there is interest here in the group.
Yes.
You have scholarships also for that.
Yes.
Right?
We have scholarships through USAID, so we can offer this course too. Cross-border e-commerce starts on 16 November.
Yeah,
yes.
And that's in English, and that's tested and tried in Spanish, and now
yes,
it's available in English.
It's in English, and I know that it's an issue for your region. But it's in English, yes.
Well, English is easier than Spanish. It's definitely,
yes,
there are
it's less
scholarships
for
available.
English.
So. Yeah, and
Mhm,
it's in my experience, having worked a little bit with e-commerce institute on this, the Latin
Mhm.
American e-commerce ecosystem as well, and some larger companies that are there have been very aware of the need to cultivate the e-commerce ecosystem. So they have also offered to support these courses and offered scholarships as well for smaller businesses to be able to. So there's definitely larger companies
Yes.
helping the small ones and bringing everybody up.
Yes, you can have more information about e-commerce institute at ecommerce.institute, and my email is directora at ecommerce.institute. It's difficult to say directora, but I can share my screen and a second. And ahí va. and you can see the website and my email.
Very good, and we'll be happy on the part of FGI as well to distribute to the participants any emails or requests for contacts. So with that, thank you all very much for your participation and joining us. And of course, a big applause, a virtual applause for our panelists for their excellent remarks. And hopefully we can see everybody next year as well with us. Thank you again for joining us. Thanks, Erika, for coming so early, your time. And have a good evening, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.